for our final presentation of the day, I'm very pleased to bring back Artie Bulgrin out of his semi-retirement, do we call it, from ESPN to share with us the findings of a study he just completed for CIMM to interview thought leaders on the opportunity for standardized TV and video ad impressions. So let's give a warm welcome back to Artie.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for staying. This has been a great opportunity. I got to connect with some old friends during this process, and actually learn a lot in the process. So I just got 15 minutes, so let's get started. Oh my goodness, I don't know how that got up there. That's right, I was supposed to be retired. I'll do a better job next time. First, hindsight can be helpful when we're talking about a question like this, which is an important one to the industry. So just a brief history on video ad measurement. First, going back to 1987 and the Nielsen People Meter, when we think about Nielsen measurement in those days, TV has always had a somewhat imperfect measure of commercials given the constraints of the measurement at the time. And since 1987, when that was a really big introduction, moving to average minute audience with demographics on a daily basis, it was still a blended measure of both content and commercial content, those of you that are old enough to remember that. And then we move on to 2009, and another big move forward. Nielsen C3 ratings launched around that time. It had been in test for a good 2-year period before that. And that was an average of just commercial minutes, a big step forward, but still an average of commercial minutes without the precision of looking at individual ad units. And it did cover, of course, the issue of time shifting at the time. On the digital side, person's measurement of digital video, as opposed from just device measurement of impressions, began with OCR, now DAR, and VCE from Nielsen and VCE from ComScore, which introduced the ability to model demographics to digital video impressions or ads served. But while more granular in this case, digital campaign measurement is often more of a custom solution lacking marketplace transparency. Not everybody can see the performance of ads across all platforms. Today, Nielsen has introduced total audience measurement with total ad ratings. In this case, Nielsen has taken a big step forward to measure television content and ads separately with the ability to estimate reach across platforms for advertising. But they're still maintaining a separate method of ad measurement for TV and digital platforms, and the reason for that is just so that they can move forward quickly with this. And in addition, we've had many different forms of proprietary, custom, some say hack methods of measuring digital video ad performance, and we are doing business that way. It's not high quality, but many are doing business that way. The point is, today video is a bifurcated set of measures, with one side being stable and transparent but lacking granularity in some cases, and the other less consistent and transparent with a lot of quality issues. So this leads to an effort by the MRC to bridge this gap between TV and digital measurement. And late last year, the Media Ratings Council introduced new digital audience-based measurement standards for review by the industry and the public. And the excerpt that you see here is right from the document that's on the Media Rating Council's website. It's designed to develop and encourage the marketplace adoption of new industry measurement standards designed both to improve the overall state of digital media measurement and to facilitate the creation of effective cross-media measurement opportunities. It would require duration weighting being applied to digital video ad impression measurement when using cross-media comparisons and analysis. The idea, the next step in terms of full cross-platform measurement, TV and digital video, would be for television to adopt similar methods, which would mean individual ad unit measurement on the TV side and adopting a duration-weighted approach. So as a result of this, CIMM thought it would be worthwhile to take the industry's temperature on this topic and assess what the future may look like. So as part of its cross-platform measurement initiative, CIMM has been interested in understanding how, when, and whether or not the television industry will consider moving to buying and selling ads based on ratings for individual ads or spots and adopting this duration-weighted approach to be consistent with the other side of the marketplace. So the idea was to interview influential decision makers and thought leaders in media and advertising, assess the current state of television and video ad measurement, and then identify the advantages, challenges, and industry support for moving to a standardized approach for television video ad impressions. So this was a simple set of business-to-business executive discussions with me as the moderator, highly qualitative, but still effective, I think. We were very lucky to include a very esteemed group of smart and experienced executives across every relevant segment of the industry. You can see the distribution of the respondents across the industry categories. And I just want to take a quick opportunity right now to thank all of them publicly. Some of them are listed in the appendix of the report that you each have. Some have elected to remain anonymous. Each conversation was considered confidential, and I must say, though, that I thoroughly enjoyed each one. Each respondent was, to a person, was candid, thoughtful, and very, very engaged in the conversation. They really care about this topic. Again, 27 interviews were completed, leading to this, to the results that you're about to hear. Now, let me just dial back for a second on the methodology here. We began with, to get a gauge of what's going on, baseline gauge of what's going on in the industry. I started with 6 Likert-type scaled questions with only a 4-point scale, no room for a neutral response in this case. And this was just a simple way of quantifying what the state of the industry is now, or the perception of the state of the industry right now. And then in order to dig deeper into these issues, we had a bunch of open-ended questions dealing in 4 key areas: advantages, disadvantages, and barriers to adoption, measurement considerations and concerns, impact on resources, the business and the industry, and then finally, what would be the steps necessary to bring this change about. Now, these were the first 5 Likert-scaled questions, because the last one dealt with the critical question of adopting this MRC proposal for cross-platform measurement. The first question was, how satisfied are you with the state of linear television measurement today? How satisfied are you with the state of digital video ad measurement today? 4 being very satisfied in those 2 cases. Next question, the traditional ratings currency for linear television advertising today, or C3, still has value. Similar to the first question, but very different and nuanced than that first question. 4 would be strongly agree. It was an agreement question. Next, it's critical that the advertising industry have a standardized currency for video advertising across all distribution platforms. 4 would be strongly agree. And then finally, how important is it to be able to combine audiences for a particular ad across all distribution channels with the ability to accurately measure net reach, exclusive reach, and duplication of audiences across all platforms? So here are the results, quantified in a simple bar chart. Now, the first 2 blue bars indicate the satisfaction with first television and then digital video ad measurement in the industry today. TV does get higher marks, but overall the assessment is fair to poor if you combine the results for both of those. Turning to the 2 green bars, first, when asked specifically about C3 television ad measurement still having value, the level of agreement was relatively high. These executives felt that within its scope of measurement, C3 was reliable, projectable, and transparent, albeit lacking granularity and with some measurement gaps. We all knew what C3 was doing, and it's credited with enabling a stable marketplace for a number of years. And when asked about standard cross-platform currency, when asked about standard cross-platform ad currency for video being critical at this time, there was agreement, but not unanimously strong agreement. So it is considered important, but not necessarily critical right now. And you see a score there, an average score there, about 3.4 on a 4-point scale. Finally, in red, what is considered critical out of all this, or very important, is an accurate measure of audience, net reach, and duplication across platforms for television and video ads. So I want to take a closer look at these 2 last questions, agreement on a cross-platform standard being critical, and then the importance of net reach. And then we're going to look at the specific proposal from the MRC and get a score on that. Now, despite the general lack of satisfaction with television and digital video ad measurement, there was no consensus that a standard cross-platform currency is critical to the industry right now. Important, yes, but not critical. Less than half of those interviews strongly agreed that a standard cross-platform currency is critical, but all but one respondent at least somewhat agreed with that statement. This fine line of difference in sentiment hinges on two words, and that is currency and critical. It's a reflection of opposing attitudes about measurement overall, which can be described as traditional and contemporary, my words. But the contemporary view certainly outweighed the more traditional view in this case. And here's a sampling of some paraphrased comments from this section. First, the traditional view, those that strongly agreed that a standard currency is critical. Some of the mentions here were the industry will benefit from simplicity versus duplicity, which most believed occurs today. Currency and measurement can't be separated. Marketers have to go where the consumer is going. And finally, we simply can't answer cross-platform questions today. That's a reflection of the attitudes around this traditional view, or those that strongly agreed with a cross-platform standard. In terms of the contemporary view, the reaction was slightly different. Again, this is a difference between strongly agree and agree. So those that somewhat agreed, some of their statements were, yes, we need consistency, but currency is a strong word. It scares people sometimes. Different media need to be measured differently. There was a host of people that believe, let's solve the problems of the media pillars first before we go over and above to unify them. The word currency is too rigid. This group tends to like flexibility. We've proven that it can work in some cases. And finally, there are no longer any standard metrics in media. So in summary, the traditionalists have a very confident and more rigid vision for what currency is, why we need it, and what the benefits are. The contemporary group, though, still thinks a standard currency is important, but is a little bit more skeptical about a single currency working in this era right now. That we need some flexibility given the differences across media platforms. Now, what I thought was very fascinating about the results of this is the reaction that the difference in the reaction and the more positive or higher level of agreement that net reach and duplication is important versus a standard currency itself. So while a cross-platform currency may not be considered critical by all at this time, an accurate measure of net reach and duplication is. Almost all agreed that it's very important to be able to accurately measure net reach, exclusive reach, and duplication of audiences across all platforms. This opinion crosses those party lines, if you will, in the critical aspect of currency. While an ad impression currency may not be deemed critical by all, there is bipartisan agreement that measures of net reach, duplication, and exclusivity are critical today. Modeling is simply not adequate any longer due to rapid change, growing fragmentation, and lack of valid input data. Furthermore, as video platforms expand, fragmentation increases and behaviors change, achieving reach and accounting for frequency then becomes a greater challenge, but essential for the success of quality campaigns. So here's a sampling of comments from this question, from this section of the discussions. The first is, this is more important than currency because the capability just doesn't exist right now. We need a system of measurement that we don't have today. Next, this would enable us to plan effectively against holistic reach goals and optimize across linear and digital platforms, which we can't do today. I love this one. As a marketer, I'm telling a story, and I need these data for audience orchestration. Every interaction is iterative and adds value, so I need to know which chapters of my story have been seen and where. And then finally, this will become more important as brands start to look at campaigns holistically. So as the marketers start to change how they look at things, this is going to accelerate the importance of this overall. So there were a few who believed this could be too demanding or that traditional audience measures alone are not enough, that we need to measure better and qualify audiences beyond age and gender surrogates. Now, let's get to the support for the proposed standards. We asked a general question about a standard currency across digital and television. Now we're getting a little bit more specific. So with George Ivy's help, I crafted a description, and this is an abbreviated version of a proposal like this, and I'll read it to you. Now, when I conducted the interviews, this was sent to the respondents, and I also read it during the interview. The proposed standard would be the Media Ratings Council has been working on a cross-media measurement standard for video advertising. This would enable a common currency for video advertising running across all platforms such as standard linear television, streaming TV, and other forms of digital video, both long form and short form. The goal is to standardize measurement for video ads using a duration-weighted gross impression as well as a standard gross impression. These measures will include viewability verification and IVT filters. Besides having a common currency for all video ads, this standard approach would also enable the measurement of net reach and duplication of audiences across platforms. Now, this is where I introduced the final 4-point Likert scale question to address the likelihood to support this standard going forward. And the score was a 3.5 overall. And this was comparable to the average agreement score that we saw for the other question. It's critical that the advertising industry have a standardized currency for video advertising across all platforms. But in this case, the median score was 4, with the majority very likely to support this standard. So there were some that felt that it was somewhat important. The reasons were varied, but it's centered on the notion that whether this becomes a true currency or not, the industry desperately needs a unified approach to measure video advertising. And based on these interviews, here are some reasons why the majority was very likely to support the standard. We heard things like, we need a consistent standard and comparable metrics. There's a need for greater transparency industry-wide. The need for digital video ads to have a time exposure component and not just a viewability qualifier. And then finally, the need for linear television to have a disaggregated measure of ads by brand and by campaign, which doesn't exist yet. There were also a minority who were not very likely to support this standard, and here are some of their comments. The goal is admirable, but the devil is in the details. How do we account for different qualities of exposure by platform, which is a great question. We can't assume that the quality of exposure on mobile is the same as the quality of exposure on a mobile device. The idea of one metric is a fool's errand. Exposure is just the beginning. We talked a lot about this today in terms of it can't be just about exposure. Business outcome may have to become part of this process, but maybe just eventually. And then eventually, this needs to be tied to business outcome. I'm running ahead of myself here. So to dig deeper into what we've just assessed here, there were some discussion themes, and I'm going to quickly go through these. And first was the advantages and disadvantages of a new standard currency. Well, some of the advantages were, of course, simplicity and efficiency versus duplicity and complexity. Consistent, unified measure across all platforms, including reach and duplication, and then overcoming significant transparency issues of today. If I heard that once, I heard it 27 times. And the negatives, the disadvantages of this could be simply adjusting to new currency and processes, fear of the unknown, separation of content and ads, particularly on the television side. That was talked about also today. And then hindering the value of proprietary measures. Everybody in the marketplace, particularly on the publisher side, wants to preserve the strength and the value of their proprietary measures, but perhaps that can coexist with some standardization. And then barriers to adoption include inertia due to resistance to change while outcomes and benefits remain unclear, which means that in order to roll this out, outcomes and benefits have to be crystal clear. The cost to retool and implement new organizations and workflow, breaking down the silos that still exist within organizations in the linear and the nonlinear side, and then lack of clarity and proof of performance, all of which can be overcome. Next, we talked about barriers. We talked about measurement considerations and concerns, which include, of course, Nielsen's ability to produce stable data for individual linear television ad units, the ability of any vendor to produce second-by-second data for duration weighting or derived second-by-second data, whether data for consumer targeting and attribution should be built into this scheme, and of course, vendors will need significant cooperation from publishers to get this done. Measurement is a team sport. And finally, the impact on your business to the industry, there was a very, very positive reaction to this question. A few examples are improved efficiency and ROI. Despite more data, this could actually result in fewer systems and a more simplified approach because the two sides would be unified. Forecasting would be more holistic with greater focus on yield management on the publisher side. And then finally, the ability to manage and optimize delivery on a campaign level across platforms. To begin to wrap this up, here are some examples of the comments that I received on the impact to your business and the industry. This could mean an instant shift in the way that buyers buy, greater yield, more efficient, could mean more money, could increase confidence with a higher fidelity view of advertising. This could lead to a flight to quality, and reach as a metric will matter more. This will stem the narrative that TV is in decline and video overall will become more meaningful to advertisers. And then finally, the media world will become just a little less complicated. So in conclusion, I think the results that my conclusion from this is that the industry is certainly ready to embrace change right now. There are questions certainly around the word currency. There's a desire to maintain proprietary data sources. The benefits of a single standard are very clear if we can achieve it. It could introduce simplicity and efficiency, and I think that measurement of reach in this case should be a unifying goal. This is something that stood out during the conversations. But of course, change will be hard, probably very hard. So in terms of recommended steps to bring about change, and I think I could say that what I'm about to read here actually came from Scott McDonald, and it was early on in the conversation, and I shared this with subsequent interviews and got a great reaction to it, which is why I'm finishing with this. First of all, establish clear industry education of the standard and its goal among stakeholders and the general public for comment. I want to back up for a second in saying how we execute this is critical to the success of this. That's step one. Second, establish a person-centered lab research program to study the varying qualities of video ad exposure across platforms and the rationale for any weights to be applied, and be transparent about this. Establish a basis for consensus across all stakeholders and be clear about the level of cooperation needed. And then finally, work with measurement vendors, measurement suppliers to gradually implement the standard and run parallel to existing measures as needed to gain industry adoption. This part is nothing new. We have experience with this in the industry. Those are my conclusions. That's the end of my talk, and I thank you very much for sticking around and listening.